I never thought my life would take such a drastic turn in such a short time. I always considered myself a faithful woman, committed to my marriage and my principles. But as the saying goes, never say, "Of this water I will not drink." It all started on a sweltering summer afternoon. The heat was overwhelming and the silence in our house was becoming increasingly deafening. My husband Diego had been working late into the night for weeks on an important project for his company. I understood his dedication, but I couldn't help but feel lonely and abandoned. That particular day, I was lying on the couch, a book in my hands, but unable to concentrate on reading. Sweat was beading on my forehead, and the fan was barely moving the thick, hot air. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, startling me. I was not expecting visitors. Opening the door, I found Matthew, Diego's younger brother. His friendly smile lit up his face when he saw me. "Laura, how nice to see you. Sorry to drop by unannounced, but I was passing by and remembered that Diego had lent me a book. Do you think I could stop by and pick it up?" I had always liked Matthew. He was a charismatic and cheerful young man, very different from Diego's seriousness. Without a second thought, I invited him in. "Sure, come on in. Diego's not here, but I can help you look for him." "Do you remember the title?" As Matthew walked in, I couldn't help but notice how attractive he looked. He was wearing a t-shirt that clung to his body from the heat, revealing his athletic physique. I shook those thoughts from my mind, embarrassed. We spent a good while looking for the book among the library shelves. The search turned into a pleasant chat about literature, her studies at the university, and my work as a graphic designer. For the first time in weeks, I felt heard and valued. "Would you like a cool drink?" I offered when we finally found the book. "It's hot as hell." Matthew eagerly accepted, and we sat in the kitchen with 2 glasses of ice-cold lemonade. The conversation flowed naturally, and soon we found ourselves laughing and sharing anecdotes like old friends. "You know, Laura," Matthew said at one point, "I've always admired your creativity. Your designs are amazing." His compliment took me by surprise. Diego rarely complimented my work. "Thank you, Matthew. It means a lot coming from you." Our gazes met for an instant, and I felt a spark of electricity between us. Startled by the intensity of that moment, I averted my gaze and changed the subject. When Matthew left, I was left with a strange feeling in my chest. On the one hand, I felt guilty for having enjoyed his company so much. On the other, I couldn't deny that his visit had been like a breath of fresh air in my monotonous routine. For the next few days, I couldn't get Matthew out of my mind. I caught myself remembering his smile, the way he gestured as he spoke, the way his eyes sparkled when he got excited about a topic. I tried to convince myself that I was just grateful for the company, but deep down I knew there was more to it. A week later, Matthew showed up at our door again. This time, he brought with him a book he thought I would like. "I remembered you mentioned that you loved contemporary poetry," he said, handing me the book with a coy smile. "I thought this one might interest you." Her gesture touched me deeply. I didn't even remember mentioning my love of poetry, but he had paid attention and had taken the trouble to bring me something he thought I might like. From that day on, Matthew visits became more frequent. He would always find an excuse to stop by the house, to return something to Diego, to ask for help with a design project for college, or just to be in the neighborhood. Every time he showed up, I felt a mixture of excitement and guilt. I knew it wasn't right to feel this way about my husband's brother, but I couldn't help it. Matthew filled a void in my life that I didn't even know existed. One night, while Diego was working late as usual, Matthew came home. We were sitting on the couch, passionately discussing a movie we both loved. When suddenly there was silence. We looked into each other's eyes, and without thinking, we kissed. It was an intense kiss, charged with repressed desire and confused emotions. When we broke apart, we were both breathless and shocked at what had just happened. "I'm sorry," Matthew murmured, though his eyes said otherwise. "I shouldn't have." "No, I'm sorry too," I replied. Though deep down, I wasn't sorry at all. That night marked the beginning of our clandestine relationship. We knew it was wrong that we were betraying Diego, but we couldn't stop. We saw each other on the sly, stealing moments together whenever we could. Matthew started visiting me in the evenings when he knew Diego would be working late. He would sneak into our room where I would wait up for him, pretending to sleep in case Diego arrived early. Those nights were magical. We would talk for hours in whispers, sharing our dreams, fears, and deepest desires. Sometimes we would make love with a passion I'd never experienced before. Other times, we would just hold each other in silence, enjoying each other's closeness. I lived on a constant emotional roller coaster. On the one hand, I felt more alive than ever. Matthew made me feel wanted, valued, and understood in a way that Diego never had. On the other hand, guilt was eating me up inside. Every time I saw Diego, every kiss I gave him, every "I love you" he uttered, felt like a lie. I tried several times to break up with Matthew, convinced it was the right thing to do. But every time I tried, all it took was one look from him, one brush of his hand, for all my determination to vanish. "I can't live without you, Laura," Matthew would tell me in those moments. "I know it's wrong, but I love you. I've never felt anything like this for anyone before," and I, weak and in love, would fall back into his arms. Months passed, and our relationship became more intense and risky. We began to see each other, not only at home, but also in hotels in the city. We made excuses for our absences, weaving an increasingly complex web of lies. Part of me fantasized about leaving Diego and starting a new life with Matthew. But another part, the rational part, knew it would destroy our family. Diego didn't deserve that, and neither did his parents, who had always treated me like a daughter. The situation became untenable when Diego became suspicious. He noticed changes in my behavior, my sudden interest in getting more dressed up, the calls I would abruptly cut off when he entered the room. One night, Diego came home earlier than usual. Matthew and I were in the room, lost in each other. We didn't hear the front door open or footsteps coming up the stairs. It was Diego's scream that brought us out of our trance. "What the hell is going on here?" The world stopped in that instant. I saw Diego's face contorted in pain and disbelief. I saw Matthew, pale and trembling, unable to articulate a word. And I saw myself, naked not only physically, but also emotionally, exposed in all my betrayal. What followed was a chaos of screaming, crying, and recriminations. Diego was beside himself, alternating between blind rage at his brother and the gut-wrenching pain of my betrayal. "How could they do this to me?" he screamed over and over. "My own brother. My wife." I tried to explain myself, but what could I say? There was no justification for what we had done. Matthew tried to take all the blame, but that only enraged Diego more. "Get out of my house," raw Diego, pushing Matthew out the door. "I never want to see you again." That night, Diego left home. I was left alone, crying until I ran out of tears, facing for the first time the real consequences of my actions. The next few days were hell. Diego refused to talk to me, and when he finally did, it was to tell me he wanted a divorce. His gaze, once full of love, now showed only contempt and pain. Matthew tried to contact me several times, but I did not respond. The bubble of our relationship had burst, and the reality was too hard to face. The divorce was quick and painful. I lost not only my husband, but also my in-laws, who had taken me in as a daughter. Diego and Matthew's parents were devastated, unable to understand how we could have betrayed the family like that. I moved into a small apartment, trying to rebuild my life. But the weight of guilt and regret crushed me. I had destroyed my marriage. I had separated two brothers. I had let down everyone who loved me. It was months before I was able to talk to Matthew again. When we finally met, it was painfully clear that what we had had could not continue. "I'm sorry, Laura," he told me with tears in his eyes. "I never meant for things to end like this. I love you, but we can't be together. Not after all the damage we've caused." I nodded, understanding her words perfectly. Our love, as intense as it had been, was tainted by betrayal and guilt. There was no future for us. We said goodbye that day, knowing that it would probably be the last time we would see each other. The end of our forbidden love story was as bitter as the beginning had been sweet. Years have passed since then. I have tried to rebuild my life, but the scars of what happened remain. Diego remarried a couple of years ago. I'm happy for him. Although every time I think about it, I feel a twinge of pain for what we could have had. Matthew moved abroad. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if circumstances had been different, if we had met at another time, in another life. But I know that such thoughts lead nowhere. What I did was unforgivable. I betrayed not only my husband, but also my own principles. I allowed loneliness and desire to cloud my judgment, and I ended up hurting the people who mattered most to me. If I could go back, I would do things differently. I would talk to Diego about my feelings of loneliness and abandonment. I would seek professional help to save our marriage. I would stand firm against the temptation that Matthew represented. But I can't change the past. I can only learn from my mistakes and try to be a better person every day. I have learned the hard way that impulsive decisions can have devastating and lasting consequences. Sometimes, on lonely nights, my mind goes back to those moments of passion with Matthew. I remember the thrill, the adrenaline of the forbidden. But those memories are always accompanied by the bitter taste of regret. My story is a reminder of how fragile relationships can be. How easy it is to cross lines we never thought we would cross. It is a warning about the dangers of looking for happiness in the wrong places, of mistaking momentary passion for true love. Now, years later, I can see clearly where I went wrong. I allowed my dissatisfaction in marriage to lead me to seek solace in the arms of another man, instead of facing problems head on. I let myself get caught up in the emotion of the moment, without considering the long-term consequences of my actions. The hardest lesson I have learned is that love, no matter how intense, does not justify the pain we cause others. Honesty and loyalty are cornerstones of any relationship, and once they are broken, it is almost impossible to rebuild them. My experience has also taught me the importance of communication in a relationship. If I had spoken openly with Diego about my feelings of loneliness and abandonment, perhaps things would have been different. Silence and lack of communication were the perfect breeding ground for my relationship with Matthew to flourish. Today, I am dedicated to my work and trying to be a better person. I have sought therapy to deal with the guilt and regret, and I have slowly been forgiving myself. But I know that the scars of what I did will always be there, reminding me of the consequences of my actions. Sometimes I wonder what Diego and Matthew think of me now. Will they have forgiven me? Will they ever think of me? Part of me wishes I could talk to them, ask for their forgiveness one more time. But I know it's better to leave things as they are. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. If I could talk to my past self, I would tell her that true love is not built on the foundation of betrayal. I would warn her of the pain her actions would cause, not only to Diego and Matthew, but to herself. I would remind her that intense but short-lived passion is not worth it if the price to pay is the destruction of a family and the loss of self-confidence. Sometimes I wonder if I will ever be able to fully trust myself in a relationship again. The fear of making the same mistakes again haunts me. Every time I meet someone new, a part of me goes on guard, fearful of falling back into the temptation of the forbidden. However, over time, I have learned that I cannot live in perpetual fear. I have worked hard to forgive myself and to understand the reasons that led me to act as I did, not to justify myself, but to make sure I don't repeat the same patterns. I have discovered that loneliness, although painful at times, is preferable to a relationship based on lies. I have learned to value myself, to not look to others for validation that should come from within. And above all, I have learned the importance of honesty, not only with others, but with myself. A few months ago, I met Diego's mother by chance at the supermarket. My heart raced at the sight of her, and for a moment I thought about turning away and avoiding the encounter. But I decided to face it. To my surprise, she greeted me with a sad smile. "Laura," she said to me, "it's been years. How are you?" We spoke briefly. She told me that Diego was happy in his new marriage, that Matthew had returned to the country and was building his career. He didn't mention what had happened, but I could see in his eyes that the pain was still there, mixed with a kind of resignation. Before we said goodbye, He took my hand and said something I will never forget. We all make mistakes, Laura. The important thing is to learn from them and move on. I hope you have found peace. His words touched me deeply. It wasn't forgiveness, not quite, but it was a way of closing a painful chapter. I realized that, although I could not erase the past, I could decide how to live my future. Since then, I have tried to live each day with more purpose. I have poured myself into my work, finding a new passion in design projects that seek to make a difference in the community. I have forged new friendships, based on honesty and mutual respect. I have also started writing, not to publish, but as a form of therapy, to make sense of my experiences. Through writing, I have been able to explore my deepest emotions, face my demons, and little by little, free myself from them. Recently, I received a message from Matthew. It was brief, but meaningful. He told me that he hoped I was well, that he had found happiness, and that he wished me the same. I didn't respond, but I saved the message. It was a reminder that, despite the pain we cause, life goes on. Sometimes, in my more reflective moments, I think about how a series of seemingly small decisions can change the course of our lives so dramatically. Every choice we make, every word we say, or keep silent, has the potential to alter not only our destiny, but the destiny of those around us. My experience has taught me that love, true love, is not just passion and desire. It is commitment, respect, honesty. It is choosing the other person every day, even when it is difficult. It is facing problems together, instead of looking for loopholes. Today, years after that hot summer afternoon that changed my life, I can say that I have found a kind of peace. It's not the happiness I once imagined, but it's a tranquility that comes from self-acceptance and personal growth. I no longer see myself as the villain of my own story, nor as a victim of circumstance. I see myself as an imperfect human being, who made mistakes, learned from them, and continues to strive every day to be better. Love remains a mystery to me. Sometimes I wonder if I will ever feel that deep connection with someone again. But I have learned not to force things, not to look for in others what I must find in myself first. My story doesn't have a happy ending in the traditional sense. There is no, and they lived happily ever after. But it has a real ending, an ending in which I have learned to live with the consequences of my actions, to forgive myself and others, and to move on. If I could give one piece of advice to someone who finds themselves in a similar situation to the one I was in, I would tell them to stop and think. To consider not just the emotion of the moment, but the long-term consequences. Talk to your partner, seek help if necessary. To remember that the grass isn't always greener on the other side, and that sometimes what seems like a solution to our problems only creates bigger problems. I would tell her that true love doesn't need to hide in the shadows, that honesty, though painful at times, is always the best path, that our actions have the power to heal or to hurt, and that we must choose wisely. But most of all, I would tell her that no matter how dark the road may seem, there is always hope. That mistakes, no matter how big, need not define us forever, that it is always possible to learn, grow and change. My story is a testament to how impulsive decisions can have lasting consequences, but also how it is possible to find redemption and growth, even in our darkest moments. Today, as I write these lines, I realize that my journey is far from over. Every day is a new opportunity to be better, to love more authentically, to live with more integrity. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I will ever fall in love again, or if I will spend the rest of my life alone. But I do know that no matter what happens, I will face each day with the wisdom I have gained through my experiences. My story is not a fairy tale. It is a true story, with pain, regret, but also hope and growth. It is a story that I hope can serve as a warning and an inspiration to others. Because in the end, we are all human. We all make mistakes, and we all have the ability to learn from them and become better versions of ourselves. So here I am, Laura, the woman who once betrayed her husband with her brother-in-law. The woman who lost everything and had to rebuild from scratch. The woman who learned the hard way that love, true love, is built on a foundation of honesty, respect and commitment. My story is not over. Every day is a new chapter, a new opportunity to live with integrity and self love. And although the road is not always easy, I know it is worth the journey, because in the end, our life is the sum of our choices. And I choose to live each day with the hope that, despite my past mistakes, I can be a positive force in this world. I choose to believe that love, true love, is still possible. And above all, I choose to forgive myself and move forward one day at a time.